Okay, thank you. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set my timer so that I don't waffle on for too long and not get through everything. And I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully you should all be able to see that. Yep, great. I've got a thumbs up. Brilliant. So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming along. I'm really pleased to have been invited here today to talk about a project that I've been working on for coming up to 2 years in February, which has been looking at the impact of sexual violence on older women. So here we go. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Esther's gone through some of it already. Obviously, we're not in a face-to-face training session, so it's a little bit different. But if anything does sort of come out through the course of this session, the session is, try and keep things confidential. If you're talking about a particular case, or do keep it confidential, obviously. If anyone else asks a question, try and have sort of respect for other people's opinions. There's no such thing as a silly question. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can towards the end of the presentation, and Esther will be keeping a note of all of those. Make sure that you look after yourself today. So I will be talking quite frankly about rape and sexual assault today. I'm not going to be going into lots of detail or anything like that, but for some people that might be triggering or upsetting. So if you find that it's all getting too much, that's absolutely fine to just step out, maybe let Esther know that you're okay. Alternatively, if there's anything that you need to talk to me about after the session, I will be sharing my contact details, so you can always speak to me afterwards. It's not a place for self-disclosure for the reasons I've just talked about, really. Esther's talked about questions. Keep yourself on mute. She's also discussed, try and turn off all your alerts and things like that. And if you do have a bit of child or pet bombing in the course of this session, that is absolutely fine. So just a little bit of information about SARSAS and what we do. We are Somerset and Avon Rape and Sexual Abuse Support. We're a specialist service for anyone who's experienced sexual violence at any time in their life from the age of 13 up. We offer a range of services which include everything that you can see there before you. So I'll just give you a moment to read those. And today I'm going to be talking to you specifically about a project that we've been working on for older women. So first of all, I'm trying to make this a little bit interactive, so it's not just one big PowerPoint presentation. So I would like you to write in the chat, if you don't mind, if someone says the words older woman or older women, are there any particular words or phrases that come into your mind? And if you could write them in the chat, then I'm hoping that Esther will be able to tell me what some of those are.
So Lisa,
actually, Esther, that's fine. I can see the chat myself, so
that's fine then.
You don't need to read them all out to me. But lots of answers there. I've got over 60, 50 plus, 60 plus, fragile, disabled, me, age 53, over 50, elderly, frail, grandmother, vulnerable, retirement age, menopausal. Great, so lots of different words that come into people's minds when you talk about the word older women or older woman. So I've just got a few nice pictures here on my slide. And obviously not everyone has the same ideas about what constitutes, what do we mean by the word older woman. But everyone has different ideas, and we all have our own assumptions or preconceived ideas of what that means. As you can see before me, you know, older women are not a homogenous group that have all had the same sort of life experiences. So when we're sort of going into this project, we needed to really make sure that we weren't just sort of generalising massively about what the experiences of all older women are. Some of you mentioned that to you it was sort of 60 plus. For our project that we worked on, it was 55 and above. And the reason for that is because Comic Relief, who funded the project, identified that it was from 55 onwards that women became underrepresented generally in services, and that there was actually quite not very much known about their experiences of sexual violence. The World Health Organization sets it at 60 plus. So why did we choose to look specifically for this project at the needs and experiences of older women? It actually covered the whole of the southwest of England, and we carried out a whole load of research. Some of that was desk research, and some of it was our own primary research through surveys and focus groups. And the reason for this was there's a real lack of representation of older women in a lot of the campaigns and the sort of service literature that we see around rape and sexual assault. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Also, because older women are underrepresented in services generally, there's a real lack of research into older women's experiences of sexual violence and the impact of that on them. We know that 85,000 women and 12,000 men experience rape or sexual assault each year. That's very likely a huge underestimate. That's based on data from the Crime Survey of England and Wales from 2017. And what we actually found out about that crime survey is that when they were asking the questions around intimate partner violence and sort of sexual violence, they only asked that questions up to the age of 59. So actually, these figures that we have here do not include the experiences of women from the age of 60 plus. So we really don't know very much about what's going on for that group of the population at all. We do know that 1 in 3% of older women have experienced sexual violence from the research that we've done. And we know that 1 in 3 of older women will have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. In the last year, we've had 33 women who have been aged over 55 who've been referred to our services for counselling or specialist support who've actually experienced sexual violence recently. So as a woman in later life or a woman of over 55. And the reason that we focus specifically on women for this project is because that's kind of where the funding came from, but also because we know that women of all ages are over 3 times more likely to be raped or sexually assaulted than men, and it's very much a gendered crime. So I'm just going to share this picture here. These are all actual posters from sexual assault and rape campaigns to try and prevent rape and sexual assault from happening. Just like you to have a look at those, and again in the chat, if you could just write what messages you think those posters send. What are they telling us when we look at those? Great, so we've got some really good answers coming here. Helen says, only younger, beautiful women are raped. The main rape is mainly committed by strangers. Only young people are represented. Older women are invisible. A negative message of all women being, oh, they're coming so fast, being drunk and out partying. Great. That's exactly what I wanted you all to say. So these posters really reinforce the idea that rape victims are mainly young, conventionally attractive, white women where there's alcohol involved on a night out, and they're attacked by a stranger for sexual gratification, and that it's about sexual desirability or sort of, you know, dressing in a certain way. We know from all the research that's been done that the majority of rape or sexual assault is committed by somebody who's known to their victim. I think it's around 13 to 15% of rapes are actually committed by a stranger, so the likelihood of that is actually very low. We also know that rape is about power and control. It's not about sexual desire or whether or not somebody is desirable. And these posters very much reinforce a lot of those myths. They're also missing a huge section of the population as well. In the case of what I'm here to talk about today, older women. So if you're an older woman looking at these posters, the message that you're going to be getting from these is, well, my experience was not this, you know, it's happened in my marriage, or, you know, it was a friend from next door and I'm not really sure if it counts. Or, you know, are these messages aimed at me? So this was really something that we wanted to try and work with through the course of our project and raise a bit more awareness around. So I'd just like you to have a quick read of this quote from a piece of research by the End Violence Against Women Coalition, where they discovered that more than a third of over 65-year-olds did not consider forced marital sex to be rape. So it's a shocking statistic, but if you put that in sort of the context of how in England there's been law changes around a lot of acts to do with sexual violence, and really they've all come in relatively recently. So the law that made rape within marriage a criminal offence only actually came in 1994. So if you've grown up in a generation where rape within marriage wasn't even illegal, and it was kind of just expected that that's what you did if you were married to someone, then you're not necessarily even going to recognise your own experiences as being abuse. So that really is a massive barrier for someone who's trying to consider whether what's happened to them constitutes as rape or abuse or sexual assault, but also trying to sort of work out whether they can even sort of go and report what's happened to them. I'm going to be looking a little bit more at some barriers a bit later on, but now we have a quiz. So I'm just going to launch the first question, and what should happen is you should, can you just correct me if I'm wrong, Esther? When I launch it, you should get a question 1 come up on your screen, and then you can click your answer.
That's absolutely right.
Having never done it before. So hopefully you can all see that question.
Yeah, they're voting. It's all good.
Brilliant. Can I do a share the results, Esther, or is that not until everyone's voted?
Not until everyone's voted, Lisa, but once you end it, you can share it for people to see.
Okay. Right, it looks like everyone has stopped, more or less. So for the sake of time, I'm going to stop it there. There we go. So share results. So 76% of you disagree with that statement. Statistics on sexual violence in adults include people from the age of 16 to 100. Sadly, that is not true. As I mentioned before, currently the Crime Survey of England and Wales, so the the most recent information that we quote, which is from 2017, the questions on sexual violence were only asked up to the age of 59. They have recently increased that, but only to 74. I don't know their reasoning for why they've now capped it at 74, because again, it just means there's a whole lot of information that we're not getting about older people. That's the first question. Okay, so question 2. The crime survey for England and Wales surveys a representative cross-section of society. Great, thanks everyone. So similarly to the last question, we're just going to share the results so you can have a look. Obviously, we know that it doesn't include people over the age of 74. Aside from that, it also excludes anyone in an institution, so places such as care homes, anyone who's in hospital, any kind of temporary accommodation, refuges, student accommodations and prisons. So again, there's a whole lot of people that we really, we're not really finding out about what their experiences are. Okay, question 3, you can hopefully all see now. So the most common location for an older woman to be assaulted is, some people are very, very fast on the buttons. Great, so it looks like we've got some very knowledgeable people here. 80% of you said in their own home, which is correct. In research done by Dr. Hannah Bowes from the University of Durham, who compiled data based on freedom of information requests that she did from police forces across the UK, she found that within their own home was the most common location, closely followed, or not too closely, but reasonably closely followed by within a care home. So we know that stuff is happening in care homes, but again, because they're not included in the crime survey, we don't really know to what extent. And the data that she gathered was the data that came from police forces. So that only includes information from people that have actually gone through the reporting process. But we know that the majority of people don't actually report their experiences of sexual violence. So we know that these percentages or these rates are really an underestimate. Okay, so the next question is, older women are, oh, you can't see it, there we go. Older women are less likely to have reported an experience of sexual violence to the police than women under the age of 55. Great, looks like most people are in agreement there. So yes, that is true. So we know that it's around 15% for women under the age of 55. It's around 13 to 15%, we think, for older women. However, having said that, the research that we did, so we did a survey across the whole of the Southwest, only 3% of the women who answered our survey had ever reported their experiences to the police, which is quite a shocking statistic. Okay, last question. The most common perpetrator of sexual violence against women 55 and above is... There seems to be a general consensus there. So partner, ex-partner is definitely what came out of the research that we did at SARS-SAS, closely followed actually by a friend or acquaintance, and some of the research that's been done in this area has found it to be an acquaintance rather than the partner or ex-partner. But at the moment, there's so little research out there, it's actually quite hard to effectively compare all the different data sets. But the key fact out of that really is it's a trusted person, and invariably a partner, ex-partner. Okay, so hopefully now you're back on the PowerPoint. Is that right, Esther?
Yep, that's what we can see.
Great. There we go. So we called our project The Chilling Silence, and that was really because we identified, or we really felt quite strongly, that there was a real silence around older women's experience of sexual violence, and that was something we really wanted to address and start changing. So what did we learn from the project? Well, some of this information we've just talked through during the quiz, but we learned, as I've just said, that the most common perpetrator was a partner, ex-partner or spouse, or an acquaintance. We learned that the most common location of assault is within the victim's home, followed by a care home. We also learned that an assault on an older person is more likely to involve physical violence. We don't know the reasoning for that, but that's what's come out of the research so far. As I said, only 3% of the women that we spoke to reported to the police, and actually 32% of them had never told anyone about their experiences. That was, despite 63% of them saying it had a negative impact on their mental or physical health. And 59% had never accessed support for their experiences. So that wasn't a shocking statistic, but it did make us feel quite sad, really, that there was a lot of women out there just holding and carrying this sort of trauma from their experiences, and never sort of being offered any support to help them recover from that. When we asked them why they hadn't told someone or why they hadn't sort of looked for support, the most common reason given for that was that a lot of them felt that their experience wasn't serious enough, and they'd kind of downplayed it and minimised it, and just felt like it wasn't serious enough to make a fuss about or report or tell someone about. But what did come out of it was that the women we spoke to and that we've spoken through all the different projects were pleased that they were actually being finally asked about their experiences and being given the opportunity to share their opinions. So, bearing in mind some of what I've talked about, just wonder if anyone can think of any specific barriers or barriers that older women particularly might experience if they were thinking about telling someone about their experience or disclosing, or trying to access some kind of support for their experiences. Or if you've had experience of working with a woman who's sort of talked to you about what she's found hard, or you've picked up on. So we've got stigma, shame and embarrassment. Yeah, not being believed. Shame's coming up a lot there. Not being believed. If it's their husband, they think it will impact negatively on their children. They feel selfish, focusing on themselves. Brilliant. So pretty much everything that you all mentioned there is what came up from our survey and also the focus groups that we ran. So just to sort of cover anything that anyone hasn't written on there, dwindling support networks. So as somebody gets older, inevitably their support networks are going to get smaller. And if you don't have that support around you, sort of making you feel like you deserve support, or you've got people to speak to, that gets increasingly hard. Similarly, another thing that comes with aging is, for some people, a lack of physical mobility. So just being able to get somewhere to have maybe an assessment, to access counselling, or even travelling to a sexual assault referral centre if you wanted to have forensics taken, all of those can present potential challenges if you're an older person or an older woman. As somebody mentioned, I think, fear of or previous experience of not being believed. If you've tried to tell someone before when something's happened to you and they've not believed you, it's going to put you off ever doing it again. Older women are more likely to be rurally isolated. They're actually more likely as well to be living in social isolation and poverty. Not wanting to leave the family home, so worry that if you tell someone or report something, you're going to have to leave your family home where you've lived for the last 50 years, and with that, leaving behind maybe your last sort of support works or your friends or your neighbours. And along with that comes a bit of a fear for the sort of older women of being maybe put into a care home because it's deemed unsafe maybe for you to be in your home if the perpetrator is the person that you live with. You may have reliance on the perpetrator for your own care or financially, and you don't want to leave that behind. Similarly, you might be caring yourself for the perpetrator. So there's a lot of complexities of interdependence that come into that. Some women may have reduced cognitive ability or dementia, which means that making a disclosure in a sort of structured way, or a way that people deem to be believable, becomes harder and harder. And often people might put someone's disclosure down to reduced cognitive ability or dementia. So they might actually misinterpret what they're saying or minimize it as not being a real experience of sexual violence. And then the other barrier that we came across was women not really recognizing their own experience as abuse because it's happened within a relationship, or it happened at work. It didn't happen on a night out when they'd been drinking. Their experience is not reflected by a lot of the myths that we see every day in the media. So this slide, it's a bit of a jokey picture, but actually it was a really serious thing that came out of our survey. And these are all quotes from the women that responded to our survey about how things for them were just different back then or in the past. Sexual violence was quite downplayed or normalised or minimised, and it certainly wasn't talked about in the way that we do now. There wasn't conversations around consent culture or Me Too. It was almost accepted of part of what just came with being a woman. There weren't specialist support services like there are now. And it just, things were different for them back then. So that's a lot of social and cultural attitudes for people to overcome when they're really trying to sort of frame their own experiences. So very quickly, I want to just talk briefly through some of the impact that sexual violence can have. And this is on all survivors, victim survivors of sexual violence. So, older women aren't a sort of special group that have their own reactions to sexual violence that are different from everyone else's. Having said that, some of those trauma symptoms can be exacerbated or made worse with older age because of things like social isolation or lack of support networks or failing health. And also for a lot of the women that we talk to, there's something about a cumulative impact of different experiences of sexual violence across their life course that really, it could be over a course of 50 years. That's a lot of trauma to be carrying for all of that time. So we know that sexual trauma can result in one or all of these impacts that you see in front of you. You will see that down here, I've put the menopause. Obviously, that's not an impact, but I've put it on there because it came up as an unexpected finding in the research that we did, that some of the women we worked with mentioned that they'd been able to cope with their feelings or their experiences of what had happened to them until they started going through the perimenopause. And then it just seemed to sort of set everything off and they were no longer able to contain it. It sort of triggered flashbacks or anxiety. Their sleeping problems were made worse. So there did seem to be a link between trauma symptoms and, making it harder to cope with those symptoms as a result of going through menopause. But it's a very, very under-researched area. And I'd love to have more information to give you on that. But at the moment, that's all that we've got. But we know that there is a link there somewhere. So just quickly, a few signs that you could look out for if you were concerned that somebody might have had experienced sexual violence. They might not have any of these, or they might have lots of them. And there's physical signs and there's non-physical signs. So it's really just to kind of be aware of them. And in a lot of cases, we know often that these might be written off as being caused by other things. And it's just having that awareness of thinking, okay, well, possibly something has happened to this person, or somebody has done something to them. So some of the physical signs, I won't read them all out, but you can see them there in front of you. And the non-physical signs really would be any of the trauma symptoms that we've just sort of looked at on the previous slide, but also a real sort of change, I guess, in behaviour. So becoming more angry or distressed, or withdrawing completely from social contact, maybe being much more on edge, so more anxiety, or really sort of jumping if somebody startles them, maybe appearing a bit more confused, or maybe not wanting help from a carer, so not wanting to be touched, particularly with intimate care, which I'm sure you can understand would be quite a traumatic thing for someone to go through. And then I just briefly wanted to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID-19 has had on some of the older women that we support or work with. So there has globally been an increase in violence against women and girls. There's been an increase in domestic violence reports to the police. We know that some older women will be increasingly isolated by the current sort of lockdowns and having to shield and try and keep themselves safe. We also know there's a bit of a lack of oversight at the moment within care homes because they're not having the regular visitors in the same way, they're not having the inspections in the same way. So we don't really know that much about what's sort of going on in there. And we as a service, as have a lot of the other services, have had to change the way that we deliver our support. So we're currently not able to offer outreach support, and all of our services are online or by the telephone. So that doesn't work for everyone. So at the moment, it feels like there's a lot of women out there that we would like to reach, but we're simply not able to. So we're really trying to think of ways around that and how we can really reach out and offer those women support. So what can I do? Well, really, this is what can you do? So it's just a few things for you to think about, really. So the most important thing that you can do if somebody tells you they've experienced sexual violence at any time in their life is listen and believe. See if you can offer them choices about, you know, whether they want to report or whether they'd like to access support. You could find out a little bit more about the impact of trauma on someone who's experienced sexual violence. Be aware of and look out for signs and symptoms in the women that you work with or support. I can't read what I've written on this button because the screen's over it. There we go. Think about language. So think about the way that you're talking about sexual violence. Not everyone uses the same language to talk about rape and sexual assault. So it's about trying to sort of mirror the language of the person that you're talking to. Challenge assumptions around older women and sexual violence, and that could be your own assumptions or it could be the assumptions of other people. Ask the question if you're worried about someone, and it's a difficult thing to do, but you know, just, are you safe? Do you feel safe? Is anyone's behaviour worrying you? Just open up and hold the space for someone to tell you something if that's what they would like to do. And then finally, help us raise awareness around the issue by ordering and sharing one of our lovely posters. And we also have a guide that we've just launched, which is aimed at people, anyone really, who works with or supports older women. And it's just a brief guide that's got signposting information, talks about the impact of trauma, tells you sort of where to go and what to do if someone discloses to you, and a little bit about what we've learnt through the course of this project. And I can give you all the details about that at the end. And don't forget to look after yourself as well. Hearing some of these things can be distressing and upsetting, and it's important that you're also in the right space to be able to support someone. So you need to look after yourself. And then here is some useful signposting information. So we've got a helpline on there, the number for Age UK, Hourglass, who are a national charity. They're the only charity actually that specifically offer support to older people who've experienced any kind of abuse. And this is the link to our recent report that we launched back in January. And this is my contact details, and thanks very much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?